And so the first thing you got to think about is status quo. Like, what are you going to have to replace? Like, what does the company stop doing to adopt your thing? And that is often stuff that doesn't look like you at all.
Welcome to Thought Sparks. Like, subscribe, comment, share, and enjoy.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Thought Sparks podcast, where I invite people to have a conversation that are interesting, provocative, and thought-provoking. And my guest this week is April Dunford, who is a dear acquaintance, good friend, somebody I could have connected with over the years. And it is such a pleasure to finally make this happen. Welcome, April.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. I know we had a real hard time getting on each other's schedules to make this thing happen. I think we've been working on it for more than a year. So pretty excited that we finally made this happen.
Well, and as it happens, this is actually a good time because April has a brand new book, which is a very significantly updated version of her previous book called Obviously Awesome: How to Nail Product Positioning So Customers Get It, Buy It, Love It. And I would encourage anybody who's got to market anything, including yourself, to go get a copy of this book because it's very practical. So April, you know, I've known each other for a while. We met, I think, initially at the Business of Software conference.
Yeah, Business of Software conference. We were just talking about how much we love that conference. So
run by a madman named Mark Littlewood.
Yes.
And April gets to go to the next iteration of it, which I can't just because my screen is just too much. But Mark is great. He's like, it's like he's tending his flock. And the people who go to this are people who are genuine software entrepreneurs. And so April's topic is really germane to the products they create, a lot of which are digital products. So it's not something you can drop on your foot. So positioning becomes absolutely critical. But I want to start off by asking you your opinion about the classic positioning statement.
Yeah, good question. So back when I was a junior product marketer in the early days of my career working at a tech company, that's how we were taught to do positioning. So the positioning statement, if you don't know about it and you've never encountered it, it's kind of a Mad Libs fill in the blanks kind of a thing that says, we are a blank that does blank, unlike blank, blankety blank, blank. And the blanks are things like who's your competition? What's your value proposition? What market do you intend to win? And I remember learning this and thinking, well, the big question I had was, how do we know that we have the right words for the blanks? So, for example, one of the blanks would usually be market category. Like we are a CRM, for example. But how do I know that I've got the best market category? Because let's face it, in tech, a lot of times we have products that we could position them in multiple different market categories. Like I've had CRMs that look a lot like a contact manager, which could look a lot like a workplace manager, which could look like sales enablement in some ways. They could also look like project management. So how do I know that a CRM is the right position, the right market category for me to position this product in? And the positioning statement exercise seemed at best a way to write down positioning, but it certainly didn't seem to me like a way to actually get to good positioning. Like, how would I know that these are the best ways and this is the best way to figure it out? I took a class, sort of a continuing education class at Northwestern University, and the professor was there, and mainly what they talked about a lot was consumer packaged goods. But I was working at a database company at the time, and and so he showed this fill in the blanks thing, and I said, okay, but I put up my hand, and I was explaining that we had this database and it was failing. And part of the reason it was failing is we didn't think of it like a database. We thought it was like a spreadsheet on steroids. So we were positioning it as business productivity software. Now, eventually, we repositioned it as an embeddable database for mobile devices. Like there's really different positioning. And the first position didn't work at all, and the product was a total failure. Second positioning really worked. Product took off. Everything was amazing. So I asked the guy, I said, well, how would I have solved that problem ahead of time? Like, how would I have known that the first was bad and the second one was good? Like ahead of time, couldn't we have figured that out? And the professor said, well, trust me, April, you'll just know. And I was like, I don't know, man. Like we didn't actually in the company. So I was, at that point I thought, well, the positioning statement, okay, maybe we can capture our positioning that way, but it's not going to give us the answers to what goes in the blanks. We're going to need some kind of another methodology to actually figure that out.
And that's evolved into what is now this book. And so,
Correct.
I mean, your journey has been fascinating. To go from being sort of a tech executive to business of software to speaking, and now I think it's fair to say you're one of the world's leading experts on this very tricky topic of positioning. And it's so important to me because, well, my bias is we're going kind of from this world of physical things, cheap oil, suburbs, appliances, that whole scheme of things,
Right.
into a world where more and more of what we interact with is going to touch digital in some way. And so it's a world of intangibles. And if you're dealing with intangibles, as you found out with that first product, positioning is critical. If you can't explain to somebody how this thing fits in your life and what it does, like, how do you even know? So how did that journey happen for you?
Yeah. So, it's interesting too, if you think about the way we think about tech companies, like one of the things I noticed when I took classes on positioning, and those were always oriented in consumer packaged goods. So it was like, how do we position toothpaste, or how do we position, I got shoes or something. And so they were always talking about something very tangible that, essentially a consumer would come in and buy. If we look at software, it's really different in a lot of different ways. Like one, we typically have a team of people involved in buying it. So, if I was to buy customer relationship management software, let's take that as an example, CRM, there's going to be someone from sales and the sales team involved. There's going to be somebody from IT. The end users are going to have to like it. The security person is going to have to like it. The compliance person needs to like it. I probably have to run it up the chain to my boss because I can't just make the decision on my own. It's 200 grand worth of software. My boss is going to have to like it. And so there's real stakes if I get this wrong. It's not like toothpaste at all. Like if I buy the toothpaste and I'm like, you know what, I don't like this, I just don't buy that one again. It's no big deal. Nobody's going to get me in trouble. If I pick the wrong thing in enterprise software, well, I might get fired. Like, bad things will happen. So these things are really different. The other thing that I think is interesting about software versus tangible goods is that it is normal and in fact expected for the positioning to change over time. So if I had toothpaste, let's say I had toothpaste and I was marketing it at babies, I would have the baby toothpaste and it would have the baby packaging and whatever. But if I decided I was going to go get into another market and let's say now I'm going to go sell it to grandmothers or people with dentures or something, then I would launch a whole new product and it would have whole different packaging and maybe a different name and a whole different thing. In software, what happens is we have this sunk cost. We've developed this software. It took us a long time to build it. It took a long time to test it and roll it out. And typically what we have is it evolves over time. So if you look at, we have a CRM. Let's take Salesforce as an example. I'm Salesforce. I'm selling, when they first started, they were selling at the very, very bottom end of the market. And then eventually, the product got more robust, more feature rich. They're crawling up into the mid market. Today, they sell to very, very big enterprises, all the way down to the mid market. But the bottom end of the market, they don't really sell too much to that because they're a little bit too complicated, a little bit too expensive. So this is very different from consumer packaged goods. Like we don't have a thing like that where it's like, you were this and then 5 years later you were this, or you have a vision to be a completely different thing than what you are today. Then this is a positioning challenge. This positioning is going to shift over time. And so you need a methodology to fall back on to think about, okay, how are we actually going to do that? Mm-hmm. So this is the thing that vexed me. So since the beginning of my career, I was really interested in that. I was interested in, we've seen in tech, like sometimes you have a thing where it's clearly superior functionality, mm-hmm. and it doesn't win in the market. And sometimes we have something that's not that great a product, but it actually captures everybody's imagination. That does win in the market. And I had my own experience where, we had a product and it wasn't any good. And then we rethought about how to position it. And all of a sudden it took off. So I thought, well, we should be able to do this in a repeatable way. there should be a methodology. And at the time, there was this great book. It's so great, it sits on my desk all the time. We'll reach over. That's this one. Everybody's read it. It's called Positioning: The Battle for Your Mind by these guys, Rees and Trout. And I had read this book, and it was great. I think anybody that's interested in this topic should read it. But the frustrating part is it doesn't give you a method. It tells you what positioning is, why it's interesting. It gives a whole bunch of examples, but it was written in 1982, so there's not too much tech in there. That was pre-internet.
Right.
So they're like repositioning the country of Jamaica, and I'm like, I got a database, man. I think it's different.
Totally.
And so I thought, okay, like, I'm not like they literally have a chapter in here, chapter 22, repositioning the Catholic Church. I'm like, I think databases are different. Anyways, so when I read this book, I thought, well, there must be a way, like we're all doing this thing. There must be a way for us to do this in a repeatable way. And so that became sort of a big thing for me for a handful of years where I was like, can we take positioning? Can we distill it down into its component pieces? And then can we develop a methodology where we move through it piece by piece by piece to figure out this is the best possible positioning that we could have for right now? And then let's try and go test that. So my work has been really focused on that. It's been a long journey. First, I was doing that first in-house as a head of marketing at tech companies. And then now I've been consulting. It's been 11 or 12 years now. And so I do that as an outside consultant for B2B tech companies where I come in and help them with this positioning stuff.
And what's interesting is that's a very big niche, but it's a niche, and you're very clear about, this is what I do. I'm not selling baby food.
That's right.
And
like it actually feels like quite a small niche to me in some ways. I only work with tech companies, first of all. So, people come to me and I get calls all the time. And they're like, I've got this thing, it's makeup. And I'm like, I don't know anything about makeup. So, so it's only tech companies. It's only B2B tech companies, because I think positioning in consumer tech is also very different. So it's only B2B tech companies. And the vast majority of the companies that I work with, the thing that they sell is so complicated that you can't sell it zero touch off the website without talking to a person. So all the companies that I work with, there's a salesperson involved, which means in that first conversation you have with the customer says, okay, you got me. I'm here for half an hour, 45 minutes. Sell me, man. What do you got?
Right.
And you got to be able to really nail that story in that first meeting, or the deal dies on the spot and you never get a chance to keep going with these guys. That's the specific problem I'm trying to solve.
Yeah, and I think you're brilliant at it. So just for our listeners, let's give your definition of positioning. How would the world's greatest positioning expert for software companies, how do you define it?
So positioning defines how your product is the best in the world at delivering something, some business value that a very well-defined segment of customers cares a lot about. Now, it's kind of a mouthful of a definition, but there's a few ways to think about it. Like, one is to think about it as context setting for products. Like, what it does is it doesn't replace your messaging. It doesn't replace your sales pitch. But what it does is it orients a customer towards what you do in a way that they can kind of put you in a bucket. So if I come and I say, I'm a CRM, you go, oh, you make a whole bunch of assumptions. You say, oh, you must compete with Salesforce. They're the big tech company in that space. And, you must sell to salespeople and you must do this. You kind of get oriented so that the big questions are answered, and now you can pay attention to the details of what the person has to tell you.
It's a lot of psychological connections that people have. And if you come in and you say, I'm a morphology god, I have to spend a lot of time explaining what that category actually is before we can even have a productive conversation. Right.
And so, and in tech, we have new categories emerging all the time. And so sometimes the category is well understood. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you're going to have to spend some time talking about, we're in CRM. Maybe you don't know what a CRM is. Well, let me tell you what a CRM, like in the early days, I worked on a CRM product in the early days of CRM, and we had to explain why it was different than a contact manager, which was a thing that everybody knew what that was. And so we had to say, well, there's contact managers, but there's CRMs. The CRMs are a bit more process oriented. This is how we do it. the key parts of positioning really is you have to define a set of things. And like in my work, there's 5 things. And one of them is like, if you didn't exist, what would the customer do? So what are the alternatives to what you do? Meaning, what do I have to position against? That's the first thing. And then I got to look at, well, what's different about my product? Like, what have we got capability wise that's different from the other folks out there, the other things a customer could choose? And then once we understand the capabilities, we can translate that to value. Like you might say, oh, I've got this AI thing and it's really cool. And the customer might say, well, so what? Like, why should I care about that AI thing? And you say, well, that's something that takes 10 people to do today. You can now do it with 4 because these things are going to automate it. So you're going to save money. Okay. That's the value, save money. So there's the value. We need to define that. And then in B2B, we're not selling to everybody. It's not like we're out there selling shoelaces. Like I'm selling a big tech product and not everybody cares about it. So I need to look at, here's the value that we can deliver. Who really cares about that value? So I need to segment the market and figure out who my best fit customers are. And then I need to decide what the market category is. Am I, a database or a business intelligence tool? Am I a contact manager or a CRM? So those are the 5 component pieces. Positioning defines those 5 things in my mind. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of the basis of everything we need to do in marketing and sales.
Yeah. And what I love about this methodology is it really forces you to kind of get out of the building and
yeah,
really deeply think about who is that person, like by name, that has to care about it. And I know some years ago, you were telling me the story of I forget what the category was, but it didn't sell, and then you finally realized this was something for bankers.
Yeah.
It's a special relationship management thing for bankers. And it solved a problem in banking, which I think was that they had trouble keeping track of high net worth individuals or something. And
that's right.
Almost by accident, hit upon that positioning.
Well, this is exactly it. And this has happened to me, like when I was in-house a bunch of times where we thought we had it. We thought it was so clear. But then when I went out to sell it, it was like, I'm not sure we have it. So in that case, we had this CRM, customer relationship management software. And in our mind, it was a CRM for any company, any big company. The problem with that positioning is there was already a CRM for any big company that was huge. Like it was billions of revenue. They had 10,000 employees. We're a little pipsqueak startup. And we're like, yeah, we do the same thing as them. Only, I don't know, cheaper.
Which is terrible positioning. You never want to do that.
Terrible positioning because the other guys were willing to give it away if they had to at the beginning, So we would go in, it would always be us and this big company. The customer was looking at it, and the customer would say, well, why pick you over them? And we didn't have a good story. But what we had was, we knew we had this capability that the other guys didn't have. And it looked really good in a demo. So we'd show it. And what it did was you could model relationships between people in a completely different way. That the other guys could only model relationships between people and a company. So, you had to be associated with a company. But in ours, you could model this in a different way. So you could have a person that worked at this company, but sat on the board of this company and used to work at that company, and you could model that way. So we'd show it. It looked really good in the product too. We'd show it. People would say, oh man, that's cool. And then they'd say, so what do you use that for? And we'd say, anything you want. Which is kind of like saying, well, we don't know. You tell us. You tell us what the value is. Oh, I don't know.
I see that happen a lot. Companies love this thing, and then they expect their customer to figure out what to do with it.
That's exactly it. So we were in that situation. So we're showing the thing and we're like, doesn't it look cool? And they're like, yeah, it looks cool, but I don't know. Like, how am I going to make any money with this thing? I don't know. And so it went on like that. And we were selling to anybody, like taking our victim where we found them, right? So we're selling to telecoms, we're selling insurance companies, we're, anybody that comes by. And most of the time we're unsuccessful. So we have a handful of customers. And what cracked the code for us is we got a meeting with head of investment banking. And the only reason we got the meeting was we hired a new sales rep. He had a relationship. His buddy was the head of investment bank in a big investment bank. And he brought us in and we did this demo and we showed him this thing, this special thing. And the head of investment banking went, whoa, that's cool. He said, so if you got people that sit on a board together, you can model that. And we're like, yeah. And he says, wait, like if 2 people, they both belong to a Harvard club, you could tell that. We're like, yeah, like two people used to work together. You could tell that. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, whoa, 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 hang on. He brings in two guys that work for him and he's like, show him the thing. So we showed him the thing and everybody's getting super excited, jumping up and down, and we closed the deal. And we're like, well, wow, maybe investment bankers really like our stuff. What we discovered in working with that client is that they had this thing at the time that was called a reason to call. And so you picture, your big wheeler dealer investment banker type. You go out for lunch with an important high net worth person or whatever, and you're talking about these things that you're trying to sell, and then you come back to the office and you got to look at your Rolodex of people to call, and you need a reason to call them. You can't just call them and say, hey, come, I'd like to sell you some stuff. You got to have a reason. Well, what this thing could do is you could look up that person you just had lunch with and say, oh, he must know this other guy because they used to work at the same company together. You call the other guy, say, hey, I just had lunch with John and I was telling him about this thing. He's real excited. Don't you want to hear about it too?
What?
Now we can draw the line to revenue. Now we can say, well, what if all your sales team had a reason to call and they were doing way more meetings than they would do previously? That's money. Mm-hmm. And so we repositioned the thing. Once we figured that out, we were like, well, that's kind of an investment banking thing. Maybe we're not CRM for everybody or CRM for any big company. Maybe what we are is CRM for investment bankers. And so we narrowed down the positioning to that. And the easy part about that was that now if the investment bankers were looking for a CRM, it made it really easy to find us. And then they would get to us and say, well, this sounds like something we should talk to these guys. They specialize in investment banking. And it gave us this real clear differentiator against the big competitor. So we go in and they'd say, well, how are you different than those guys? Like they're the big competitor. We'd say, oh, we love those guys. They're amazing. Like, look at them. They're so big. Like they're like the world's best general purpose CRM for, like, I don't know, call centers and manufacturing plants and stuff, but not you, Wolf of Wall Street. You need something special. Look at this thing. And then we would show them the thing and talk about it. And we land a deal every time. So that shift in positioning, being able to understand the value of what we had and understand who cares a lot about that value, was the key to unlocking a whole bunch of growth for us.
I think that's so important. And what a great story. Because I think the other thing that people get wrong is, and I see this with startups all the time, right? They're like, well, the market for AI robotic enabled flying widgets is 3 billion units and all we need is 2% of that market. And I'm like, what? How do you deserve to exist in the world?
Yeah.
And, people don't understand. By the way, I should mention the brand. This is the book, right? And I don't have anything orange, but I do have blue that kind of matches your little dots there.
That's great. But I think you're more in brand than I am. That's great.
Gotta make an effort. But I think the one of the beauties of that story to me is it's really about making choices. And what I love about this book, and I use the old version, so I want to talk about what's different in the new version, is it's so systematic. It's just like start here, then go to the next thing. Then once you've made some choices, then you have to do choices. You can't just say it's for everybody, because that's not positioning. That's just words.
Yeah.
But this concept of, once you've found that particular place where your thing fits, you can make it irresistible. And so I have this challenge, as you know, with some software I've been working on for a long time. And I have no business actually doing it because I'm not a software developer. I'm not a software company, but it's something.
We're all software developers now.
That's true. Maybe I can get an agent for me. But anyway, so I'm really super clear on the positioning, but this is a case where I don't have the capabilities that back it up. And so all that stuff has to go together, the 5 things you mentioned, and people have to be really clear about it. And if any one of them's missing, you're not going to be as successful as you could.
So true. So true. And like this thing about making choices is a good point because, it's not just about making choices about what you're going to do. It's making choices about what you're not going to do. Right. And particularly when we talk about, what does the best fit customer look like? Like, we should be able to define, look, like if the prospect ticks these boxes, they're this big, they're in this industry, they do this thing, they have these other things in their tech stack, their business model looks like this, whatever your list of things are, then you're going to have the courage to say, you know what, if it doesn't tick those boxes, we shouldn't have our very expensive salespeople chasing those deals because we're not likely to win them.
Right.
So we don't really have value to offer these guys that's better than another choice that they have in the market. And that's the hard part. So, if you think about, if I take my example of us focusing on investment banking, like when we first were talking about making that decision internally, like it was a very scary thing to think about. Like in our board hated the idea. They were like, wait a second, like we wrote you a check and invested in you to go take that big company out. Like, you're supposed to be like, how are you going to be a great big company if you're only selling to investment banks? Like, how many investment banks are there in the world? That's not a big enough addressable market. Like, how are you going to be a giant billions of revenue company if you're just focused on this little thing?
Mhm.
And so we had to explain to them that, look, this is going to evolve over time. We're not, we're going to go get investment banking. And once we get investment banking, that it's going to be easy for us to sell to all the different groups around that. We could sell to the retail group. Eventually we could sell to research group. So then we're going to creep into retail banking. And then once we have that, the positioning is going to shift. We won't just be for investment banking anymore. We'll be for banks. And then once we've got banks and we've established that, well, there's a lot of overlap between banking and insurance in certain places. And so, then we'll be building out the product to be doing more stuff that's specialized for insurance. And so at some point we'll be CRM for financial services. Well, if we could do that, then we're a great big company. And at that point, we then might say, you know what, we're CRM for any big company now. We're almost as big as this competitor that we're chasing. Now we're going to challenge them directly. But we had to educate, we had to understand that ourselves and make that choice first, and then educate the stakeholders, namely our VCs, that look like in the short term, we're just going to do banking because that's the only place where we're going to win. And if we focus all our efforts there, our win rate's going to be really high. The growth is going to be really high. And that is going to enable us to spread into the next market. But we can't take them all on at once.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like that a lot. And I think one of the things good entrepreneurs do, right, is they have that vision of the roadmap.
Yeah.
And how that evolves. So I was talking not too long ago with the entrepreneur behind Mrs. Meyer's cleaning products. And totally different category from the stuff you work in. But she said the first company we went to was Restoration Hardware. And, Restoration Hardware has this beautiful image. And when they were first starting, then we went to Whole Foods, then we went to all the upscale. But it was very clear, like, I'm going to break through with this one company that really cares. Right. And then I'm going to kind of spread out to others, which I think is a choice a lot of people don't make. So one of the things you say in the book, in case you just joined us, is Obviously Awesome: How to Nail Product Positioning by April Dunford.
I'm going to hire you. You be my sales rep.
I could do that. I can sell something I believe in, so that works for me. But you talk a lot about how people really misread who the competition is, and the way I see that happening a lot is people don't understand that just because you call yourself an X, a fashion retailer, let's say, that doesn't really mean your competition is other fashion retailers. It also means your competition is anything people could spend their money on, anything that could be like retail therapy, anything that could be like, there's a lot. I mean, yes, of course, other clothing manufacturers matter, but they may not be the thing that matters the most.
Yeah. Very, very good point. And like, it's interesting in B2B software, which is where I work, when we go in to do these positioning workshops, we start here at competition. So we start with this, and the question is phrased very specifically. It's, if you didn't exist, what would a customer do? Because if I go in and say, who do you compete with? Well, now, they'll say, Salesforce, that's our competitor. But when you ask the question, if you didn't exist, what would a customer do? Often the answer to that question is they just do it in a spreadsheet. Or they'd hire a couple of interns to do it, right? Or it would be pen and paper in somebody's binder is what would happen. And so the first thing you got to think about is status quo. Like, what are you going to have to replace? Like, what does the company stop doing to adopt your thing? And that is often stuff that doesn't look like you at all. It's like, we're using some weird feature of the accounting package that was never meant to do that. But we're making it work, and it's terrible. And there's, but I got to prove that my thing is better than that because everybody's used to doing it that way. And then you also have to worry about the direct competitors that end up on a short list against you. And you really got to put yourself in the heads of customers to understand that, because in tech, there's often lots of companies or lots of solutions that could compete with you. And in a rational world, they should compete with you, but for whatever reason, they just don't show up on the short list. And so if a customer never puts them on the short list for whatever reason, then they're a ghost. Like, I don't have to position against a ghost. As far as your customer is concerned, they don't exist. Mm-hmm. So often we'll have really different points of view. If I have the head of sales, the head of product, the head of marketing, and the CEO in a room together, and I say, if you didn't exist, what would a customer do? Often your head of product will put their hand up and say, well, they'd use AI. They'd vibe code it. That's what they do. Their internal people will vibe code it. And in some places, people are vibe coding this stuff. In other places, that's not at all happening. So I had one recently where this happened. I said, if you didn't exist, what would happen? And the head of product put his hand up. He said, vibe coding. Vibe coding is going to wipe us out. And I was like, okay, so is that happening? Like, so then the head of sales is there. And he's like, vibe coding, what are you talking about? I've never seen that in a deal. It's never come up on a short list in a deal. And the head of product says, but it will. Mm-hmm. It will. Mm-hmm. And so here's the dilemma. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, right? We're notoriously bad at predicting the future. And the only thing that matters is what's a customer doing right now for positioning. Now, if I'm the head of product, I need to worry about the future because I'm building the roadmap. And so if I'm the head of product and I believe that, then I better be building something in the roadmap so that 2 years from now or 3 years from now, when it is showing up on the short list, we're ready for it. But from a marketing and sales perspective, it's not stopping me from closing deals right now because it doesn't even show up on the short list.
That's cool.
We don't have our positioning. We should be careful. The positioning shouldn't get too far out over our skis. We can watch for those, what I would call a horizon competitor, something that may be coming down the pipe. I need my product team to understand it. I need to have a strategy. If I really believe it's coming, I need to have a strategy. But I have no reason to have competitive positioning against a competitor that is causing me zero pain right now. I don't need to actually factor that into my marketing or my sales that happens right now. 6 months from now, we'll check in on that and we'll ask the question again. And we'll say, okay, vibe coding. You seeing Replic come up in any of your short lists? And if the answer is no, we carry on. And we carry on until such time that it actually is true. And then we're going to worry about it then. But so right now, what we have to distinguish between what could compete with us, what should compete with us, with what actually does out in the field, because that's the only thing that matters for our positioning right now.
I love that. And what's interesting to me is, my world is all about 3 to 5 years out, right? But one of the big challenges, and what I really like about that, is one of the pushbacks I always get is, but we have to keep the wheels turning on the bus, and we have to keep today's business going, and I can't be thinking about 3 to 5 years out. But if I can give people, your book, obviously awesome, and say, okay, fine. Your needs for today can be met by doing this. Right. Your needs for tomorrow need to be met by maybe you read my book,
That's right. That's exactly it.
But you have to do both. And I always
tell you have to do both. You have to do both.
Portfolio. My recommendation is always your core business today has to be job one, because that's the only place you're going to get the resources to do everything else you'd like to do.
That's exactly it. You got to survive long enough to do job two.
And a lot of people get sort of stuck either too much at job one and no thinking at all about job two.
Yes.
Or they're often in, the wilderness somewhere dreaming of orbiting giant hairballs or whatever they're dreaming of.
This is exactly it. And it's hard, right, to strike that balance. And it's easy to get the two jobs confused and say, well, we know this train is coming down the track, so we should be out there talking about it right now. But the reality is, if the customer doesn't see it and you're out there talking about a thing customer knows nothing about, all you do is scare them into paralysis.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like you start talking about vibe coding, the customer's like, vibe coding? What, dude, we haven't even looked at vibe coding. Stop the deal
Right.
while I go research vibe coding.
Right.
Because now you're telling me that's important. Like, wait a minute. And this is the last thing we want to do in a deal.
Oh,
But again, if we're not planning for that thing, like if we believe vibe coding is the train coming down the track, then we better have a strategy. We better have stuff going on in product. But all this is going on behind the scenes, right? This is where do we want the product to be in 4 years, 5 years? What do we want the thing to do? Where are we predicting that the market's going to be? And are we ready for what that market's going to look like next year or the year after or the year after that? But do not confuse that with the fight we're fighting on the battlefield right now. Like I had this old boss at IBM and he would get really nervous if the sales reps were talking about things we had in development that weren't out yet, because he'd be worried about it stalling the deal. And he's like, look, we can only sell what's on the truck. Focus on what's on the truck. We can only sell what's on the truck. He used to say that all the time. And I think about that a lot because I think sometimes we get, especially right now where it feels like everything in AI is changing so quickly. It feels like these products are completely different now than they were 2 years ago. And I think there's such, excitement, but also panic and anxiety about these tools that I think for people in tech that are very steeped in this and are reading the papers and reading the research and playing with these tools every day, it's easy to forget that maybe your customers aren't quite far enough along yet or aren't as far along as you are in this stuff. So we really need to understand where's the customer at? What are they worried about? What are they doing right now? What are they experimenting with right now? We got to orient around that.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Well, and I think this is part of the reason why I think it was an MIT study that was done not too long ago that reported that 95% of people were disappointed with their investments in AI because it's very early. It'll be big, but it took electricity 40 years to transform the way we manufactured stuff.
Right.
I mean,
right.
A long time.
What we're seeing is this technology move at a pace that we've never seen tech move this fast before, and that is definitely true. But at the same time, like you say, from a commercial perspective, how people are using it commercially is moving a lot slower than what we see the capabilities, the speed we see the capabilities evolving at. And so again, we need to understand where are our customers at, how do they look at this stuff? What are they looking at? And then how do we meet them where they are?
Mm-hmm. Well, and one other thing I would add to that is that to adopt vibe coding, whatever it is you want to do, if you're sort of a middle level manager somewhere, you have to depreciate a whole bunch of stuff you had made big investments in as recently as 2 to 3 years ago. And so there's a huge internal resistance to doing that. Even if this new thing is great and shiny and wonderful, it's like the old factory managers, right? Where they were all built along, a single power source. And you've got to now write all that stuff off to adopt this shiny new electricity thing. It's the same thing with AI. And one of the reasons I think people have been disappointed up to now with the progress of AI is they have not understood that to go from there to there, that has to go away.
Right. Right.
So I love this. So back to positioning. So you're a listener, you're kind of thinking about your company. Maybe you've got AI in the back of your mind somewhere. What are the telltale signs that your positioning is just off?
So the way I used to assess this when I was in-house as a vice president of marketing, like this is what would happen. People would be looking for a new vice president of marketing. And then I would come in, do the interview. And if I thought there was a positioning problem, I could talk very intelligently about positioning. So often I would get hired as the VP marketing because I was like, look, I think your positioning is bad. Here's the process we're going to use. We're going to solve it. So they would hire me. I'm the brand new VP marketing. And of course, what everyone wants me to do is go run campaigns that drive a lot of leads so that the revenue is going up and to the right as steeply as possible. But my worry was if the positioning is not good, then I am essentially throwing water in the leaky bucket. So let's make sure the positioning is good or not right now. Now, typically I'm in a brand new company I don't know that much about the product. And a lot of the companies I worked at, the product is deep tech, right? So you're not going to figure it out in 2 weeks. It's going to take you a while. So you don't know that much about the product. You don't know about that much about what's going on in the company. So how would I assess if the positioning was good or not? What I would do is, again, if you have salespeople in the company, then there's a lot of stuff you can hear on sales calls. So back then we didn't have Gong and all these call recording things now, but I would wander over to sales and I'd say, hey, I'm just going to listen in on calls. Don't mind me. Or if a sales rep was driving out to meet with customers, I'd be like, hey, can I just tag along and listen to how you pitch this thing? And so bad positioning on an initial sales call with a prospect that doesn't know too much about your stuff, you can hear some very telltale signs that the positioning is probably not good. So usually what you get is the most common one looks like this. So your rep has this little deck that they're going to, a presentation and a demo maybe, and they're going to show the customer that. So the customer comes on and the prospect comes on and the sales rep comes on and they're like, oh, hi. And they do their little highs and they have a little chit chat. And then they get into the presentation and the rep will be, okay, so this is what we are and this is where we came from and this is what we do. And maybe the rep is showing a demo or something and we're 10, 15 minutes into it. And the customer is like, wait. I don't think I got it. Go back. You hear this thing? They're like, go back to the beginning. And we've been talking for 10 minutes. And the rep's like, okay. And the customer's like, so what is it again? Like, just back. And so there's this confusion about, at a fundamental layer, what is this thing? Mm-hmm. And you'll see it at the beginning of these calls where the customer's all squinting at it and being like, did I get that? Or they'll be asking the question like, the rep will be showing some feature, but they're asking a real fundamental, like, so it's like this, is it? And they're just trying to figure out what bucket you belong in.
Mm-hmm.
This is a positioning problem. The other one you'll get is confusion about which bucket to put you in. So they'll say, oh, so you're just like Salesforce and you're nothing like Salesforce. You are not. And then the rep is like, no, let me go back to the beginning. Then the rep is going back to the beginning going, no, let's go back to the beginning of this thing. I'll start you again. So there's some in your positioning that's triggering this comparison to something that you are not. And the customer is mentally putting you a bucket that you shouldn't be in. And then the other one you'll get is, this is almost the worst one, where the rep does the thing, they have a nice conversation, you get to the end and the customer's like, I get it. Yeah, I get it. I get what you are. You're that thing for these things. I get who your competitors are. Yeah, I get it. I just, what I don't get? I don't get why anybody would pay for that. Like, why wouldn't I just do that with a spreadsheet, man? Like, we do that today. It's no big deal. We don't like it. So what it means is, like, they get what you do. They just don't really get the value of it. And so if I started hearing a lot of that in initial sales calls, then, you couldn't be totally sure that the positioning was wrong, but you got a pretty good hint there. And if I've got that and I've got happy customers, like, all kinds of customers that bought the thing and love it. And they're like, you pry this out of my cold dead fingers. I love this thing so much. There's this gap between what an existing customer knows and what a new prospect is who's trying to figure it out. There's this gap, and good positioning should make that gap very narrow. So if I started hearing stuff like that on a sales call, I'd be like, okay, this is probably not good. And usually what I would do is then I would go to lunch with the VP sales. And I'd say, hey, I'm stupid. I'm new here. But I've been hearing these things in sales calls. Is that normal? And usually if I'm hearing it in sales calls, the VP sales knows it. Like, the VP sales says, oh my gosh, it's terrible. Everybody comes in and they think we're this. And then it takes me 3 calls before I tell them we're this. And then it sinks in and then the light comes on. They often say this. It takes us 2 calls and then the light comes on. It's like, well, what do we got to do that the light is coming on in marketing before this person even gets to us in sales? We shouldn't be 2 calls in before the light comes on. Great positioning should put the light on way before that. So if I was hearing that, then I could come to the CEO and say, well, you know what? I think maybe we got a positioning problem. We should fix that.
And do you get a lot of pushback?
Oh yeah, like usually what you get is in tech companies. Generally, the founders are technical people. They come from the technical side of things, and so they don't know too much about marketing. And usually, I'm talking about positioning. It's the first time they've ever heard the word.
Mm.
And
Mm.
so what they have is a belief in magic, right? So they're like, look, can't you just wave your magic marketing wand that just fixes this? Like, can't we just run an ad campaign? And I'll say, yes, buddy, we are going to run some ads, but first we got to figure out what to say. That's what we're trying to figure out here. What is the story that makes the value of this thing obvious and
Mhm.
obviously better than all the other things they could do? So
Mhm.
usually there's some education on that. And so the way I would do it is, again, if I had this idea that things were not so good, then I'd say, okay, I'm not saying it's bad. I don't know. What do I know? I just got here. I'm an idiot. But it could be bad. And here's what I'm seeing in sales.
Mhm.
And I went out and had lunch with, the head of sales, and that person said that's a problem. So maybe it's worth spending a day on this. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to get a cross-functional team, me, you, head of product, head of sales, head of marketing. We're going to sit down together in a room. We're going to figure it out. Now, okay. I'm not saying we're going to change it. Don't freak out. Just saying we're going to look at it. So we get everybody together and say, okay, we're going to look at it. Now, this is critical. If I get everybody together and say we're going to look at the positioning, what I do not want to happen is I don't want this to turn into let's brainstorm something, because nothing good has ever come out of this. So usually what will happen is like people will say, okay, we all get together and the CEO will say, all right, let's talk about it. Why do people love our stuff? This is bad. And then everyone will get head of sales will say, you know why they love our stuff? We just have the best darn salespeople. They just love us when we come and we talk to them. We're great. We're great salespeople. Head of product says, "Are you kidding? It's the product. Everything in the product's amazing, right?"
The
People in
functions.
marketing say, "No, we own. It's the thing. We own this space." And everybody will say it's their own thing. So what we need is a structured process where we can say, "All right, now I got everybody together in the room. Let's first get an agreement on who do we need to position against."
Mhm.
And then we're going to expose that not everybody agrees on that. But like, who do we need to position against? What
Mhm.
have we got? Then we can look at what have we got that's different. Then we can look at what is the value we could deliver that no one else can. Once we have that, then we can say, okay, not everybody cares about that. What kind of an ICP or what kind of a best fit customer cares a lot about that thing that they only get from us?
Mhm.
And then therefore, what should our market category be?
Mhm.
So that's how I evolved into doing this when I was in-house. And this is the process I take people through now as a consultant. But it came from doing it the wrong way and learning the hard way. Like, it has to be a cross-functional team. We have to have a process to work through. If we don't have those two things, then the positioning's never going to get fixed.
Well, and I think part of the undercurrent for the book is that you have to be honest with yourself, right? I mean, I think there's an
Yes.
awful lot, especially in the world of marketing. There's an awful lot of, well, of course we're the best at blah blah blah, whatever it is.
Yes.
And in reality, there's a limited number of things any company is really good at, and
So
and
true.
yes, you can be best in the world at that thing, but that means there's a lot of other things you're not going to be good at. And I used to do a lot of work on corporate capabilities back in the day, and what people don't realize is having a core competence or having a capability means you have an equal and equally powerful disability.
Oh,
And
that's
so
a
one of
great
these,
way of that's such a great way of thinking about it.
right? So I mean, my husband is an actuary, and he used to work for a firm that was run by actuaries.
Hmm.
And if you think about it, they were probably the best actuarial firm in the entire world. But if let's say you're a lawyer, right? You are never going to run that firm, and so you're going to have the best actuaries in the world, but you're probably not going to ever get the best lawyers in the world. And you just have to be very honest about that.
So true.
Right?
This is exactly the thing. Like, if we're saying yes to something, in that yes is a no, right? It means no, we're not this. If we say we're this, we can't be both these things at the same time.
So let's talk a bit about the book because it's new. It's
Yeah.
updated, expanded, and I noticed that you've
Yeah.
taken the steps, you sort of simplified them.
Yeah, I did. Do you want me to tell you the story of why the
Yeah,
number of steps changed?
great.
Okay, so so I have got this process, and the process is we break positioning apart into these 5 component pieces, and then there's a process to work through it. And while I was writing the book the first time around, the first edition came out in 2019. I was working with my editor, and we landed on this idea, like, there's going to be steps in the process, but before you get to the first component, there's a bunch of things you have to do ahead of time. Like, you have to kind of figure out what exactly it is you're positioning. You've got to figure out, well, who needs to be in the room and how do we get a team together. And, there's a bunch of things you have to do before. And then after you're done positioning, in this exercise, there's a bunch of things that have to come after. So you have to test it. You have to turn it into messaging. There's a lot of things you have to do. So in the end, we ended up with 10 steps and 5 component pieces. So there's 5 component pieces, and then there's 10 steps to actually do it. Now, I put this book out, and I'm dealing with tech people, and they're numbers-oriented people. And the fact that there was 5 components but 10 steps, there's a certain kind of person out there that really didn't like that a lot. Like, they're sending me emails and they're like, why? Why is it not 5 components, 5 steps? Why? Tell me why. And I'm trying to explain this thing. And so at the beginning, I was like, this is, if that was the only thing, I probably wouldn't have gone back to write the second edition. But when I decided to do the second edition, one of the first things I decided was, you know what? I'm going to position the first bunch of steps as pre-work and the last bunch of steps as post-work. And we're going to have 5 steps, 5 components. And no one's going to send me that email again. Well, that's one thing that changed. Uh-huh. But in seriousness, the main thing, there were 2 main reasons I wanted to get the book out, maybe 3 things. But one was, I had worked as a consultant with, I don't know, 50, 60 companies maybe at the time that I wrote the book. And I thought I kind of knew what there was to know about this. I had done this process 50, 60 times, plus the number of times I did it when I was in-house. So I thought, well, that's a lot. But then after the book came out, and the few years after that, I got really busy. And I worked with a few hundred more companies in the years after that. And there were a set of patterns that emerged that I don't think I fully understood when I wrote the book in 2019 that I wanted to explore. Specifically, the book is kind of a guidebook, like how to get this done. And what I was seeing in patterns were patterns of where companies got stuck at particular points in the process. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to redo the book and address those things in the book to say, look, when you get here, this is the problem that's going to come up, and here's how you get around it. So that was one thing. I wanted to explore some of the new stuff that I'd learned in the years after the book came out. The second thing was, there were just parts of the book I did a bad job explaining, man. And, I've sold a lot of copies of that book. And, a thing that comes with selling 100,000 copies of a book is, a certain percentage of the people are going to send you an email and they're going to say, listen, you on page 120, whatever, you said this thing, and I got to send an email back that says, I know I said it, but I didn't mean it. I meant something else.
That's too funny.
And I thought, wouldn't it be great to go back and fix those things that I know are vexing people out there? So I wanted to go do that. And then there was a handful of things in the book where, like, for example, the concept of differentiated value, which I think is very, very critical to positioning. I just didn't spend enough time in that book. I didn't want the book to be too long because CEOs have very short attention spans. They don't like long books. I heard that over and over and over again. So I was trying to keep the book very succinct. But there are some places where I just didn't spend enough time. Differentiated value is one. How to think about certain things in that process. I spent 2 pages and I should have spent 10. And so I thought, I'm going to go back and fix that too. And then the last thing is, when I wrote the book, I was mainly working with single product companies, like companies where, they were small-ish, but small enough that there was one product, and the product positioning and the company positioning were kind of the same because they were single product companies. After the book came out, I did a lot more work with multi-product companies, and specifically looking at there's company positioning. Maybe we have several divisions. There's how we position things in the division. Maybe we have individual products, but some of those products come together in a suite or a platform. And how do we think about positioning at all these different layers? So I wanted to add some stuff in there for companies that were wrestling with that because I had opinions about that. So I thought, okay, that's enough stuff to warrant going back, revisiting this material and doing an update, because the book is still selling pretty well. So I thought, okay, anybody new that's coming to this book is going to get the really good stuff.
That's a great way of looking at it.
Yeah.
I've often gone back to my previous books and thought, should I? And then it's the tension between, do I fix something I already did, or do I
That's right.
do something new? Yeah. So I'm doing some work now on what I call strategic centering, which at the level of an organization is, I think it's a related perhaps concept. And the idea is that one of your jobs as a leader is to create your strategic center. And that could be many things, right? It could be centering on a mission. It could be centering on a particular kind of customer problem, but whatever. But I think once you've chosen your center, right, that means a lot of other stuff just can't happen. So one of my favorite examples is Novartis. When Vas Narasimhan, their CEO, came into the company, it was this kind of diversified thing, right? It had an eye care division, it had consumer products, it had generic medicines, and it had this pharmaceutical company. And he went back and he looked at it and he said, the myth at the time was, if you have a bunch of consumer products, that when your drugs go off patent, they'll carry you until you find the next big miracle thing. And he said, when I went back and looked, it was the science that saved us every time. So he completely recentered the company. They sold off eye care.
So interesting.
Consumer goods, they sold off all this stuff. And they're now just in innovative medicines that treat a very bounded set of therapy areas. But what's interesting to me about that, and I think this is where it connects with positioning, is, let's say you're making a decision about building a factory to make aspirin and building a factory to make exotic new medical therapies. In a typical diversified company without a center, these are horrible arguments, and there's no one correct answer. But if you centered your company on, we're going to do innovative medicines, that's our jam, it gets easy. I'm going to do the exotic therapy, and the aspirin, somebody else can go do that. And so I think one of the things about positioning that's very clear is that it really forces you to say, are we a consumer products company, or are we this other thing? Right. And once you make that choice, it opens up kind of vast areas of opportunity, because if they'd just been going on their capabilities, which were all chemical and biology based, they never would have looked at things like radioligands, right?
Right.
And so I think it's a real kind of overlap. So we're in this world.
I love that concept so much. Like I recently did a thing with IBM, and we were looking at all of Software Group, and we were trying to, which is thousands of products, like it's really big. And we were trying to get at, the guy that runs Software Group, he's kind of like, look, like if you say Salesforce, you know what they do. Like if you say Workday, you know what they do. There's big software brands. But when you say IBM software, like how do we succinctly describe what we do across all these things and a lot of acquisitions? And in the discussion we had, we landed on this thing that was kind of simple, but a really big idea. And so the big idea is that if you look at all the other big software companies like Salesforce or Microsoft or Google or ServiceNow, they have kind of a really vertical view of the world. Like they kind of want you to have their stuff all across the stack, up and down. And when I say up and down, I mean the application, the middleware, the data, the infrastructure. If you're a Microsoft customer, you want to be on Azure, you want Microsoft stuff, you want all Microsoft stuff all up and down. Google's the same thing, Salesforce the same thing. But if you look at IBM, they're totally different. Like IBM is all about heterogeneity. They're all about, run whatever you want. Like we work with big companies, and those big companies don't want to be locked into one thing. They've got every cloud. They don't just have one cloud. They have all the clouds. They're not working with one AI. They're working with all the models. They got data all over the place. They got all the database storage things you could think of. And they have all the applications on top. They've got Salesforce, but they also have Workday, and they also have ServiceNow, and they also have this. IBM stuff is, how do you make that all work?
Exactly.
How do you make that all work? And so there is this layer in the middle, and that's what IBM's really good at. So if what you want is this distributed, heterogeneous environment, which the biggest of the big companies are like that, then and increasingly companies in the middle are getting like that too. Like, then IBM's kind of the only game in town. And so again, it's this big picture lens on it that you could potentially seeing, like, if you believe that and you got your head around that, then that would influence the way you thought about the next company you're going to acquire or the next things you're going to invest in. Like, does it further that mission or not?
Yeah, I think that's
Anyway,
really,
I
well,
love this idea of strategic centering. I think that's a great way to think about it.
yeah. So I think that's very complimentary. So, how do people learn more? My goodness, this time is just well. How do people learn more? What's next on the horizon?
Yeah, well, like I say, doing a little bit of speaking this year in support of the book, but aprildunford.com is the best way to go. The books are usually the best place to start. Like, obviously, Awesome is the name of the book, and you can get that anywhere you get books. That's a good place to start. And then if you want to go deeper into some of these concepts, I got a newsletter. There's a podcast where I just released a kind of limited series podcast going into some of the deeper concepts that I have covered in the new book. So if you want to go deep after you read the book, there's a place you can go there. The newsletter explores some of this stuff in more depth too. So aprildunford.com. So that's a place to go.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And I hope we continue this conversation because I think we got some really interesting points of overlap.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. I'm glad we made this happen.
Finally, right?
Yeah, finally.
A present for me and a present for you. So, and everybody, April Dunford, thank you very much.
Thanks.